Are you a real estate investor looking to start your first flip? Are you a passive investor looking for the next opportunity? Regardless of your situation, our mission is to help everyone work towards their unique version of financial freedom. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Conduit Capital podcast. I'm your host, Adam Barreau, and today we're going to be talking about lessons from private lending failures. Talking about failures can be difficult, but especially in the investing world, it's so important to not only talk about your failures, but learn from them. And a lot of the things that we do in Conduit Capital, a lot of our processes are the way they are because of failures or lessons that we've learned in the past. And learning from failures is crucial, especially for private lenders, um, because of one word. Um, and I've seen this spread around quite a bit by some people, and it's interesting. And that word is guarantee. I always laugh when I hear investment providers say the word guarantee because there's no such thing as guarantee in investing. If an investment provider ever says that their investment is guaranteed, you need to pack your bags and you need to sprint in the other direction. While nothing is guaranteed in investing, there are different ways that you can position yourself to hedge against the worst case scenario. But the worst case scenario is by no means avoidable. You need to make sure that you're comfortable with it, um, and that you have the necessary things in place to navigate through the uncertainty when that happens. But today I want to look through three cases of instances where problems arise and what lessons can be taken from those problems. So the first case I want to talk about is underestimating market conditions. A lot of times in the media, you see newscasters and other investors talking about, oh, geez, the real estate market is super hot, or it's really slow and lackluster. And there's a lot of nuance to that. So first, I think it's important to note that talking about the real estate market as a whole is a little bit misleading because there are so many differences in the activity in real estate markets across the United States. So real estate, market fluctuations out in California can be different from the ones that we experience in Gary, Indiana. So above all, it's important to know your market instead of just taking things at face value when the real estate market might be really hot or it might be really slow. So keep that in mind when making those evaluations. And I guess a big problem that arises when this happens is that, loans are given at these peak property values. And then if those property values fall, the borrowers default because they can't make their payments, or maybe they can't sell the house for a large enough profit to pay their lenders back. And the important lessons to learn from this is that your due diligence process should not take into account how the market is performing. And what I mean by that is that you should always be evaluating these deals. At least this is how we do it at Conduit Capital. You should evaluate these deals like the market is really slow. So that, hey, if the market is doing great and the borrower is able to make an awesome profit, then the more the merrier. Sometimes I get some feedback from our borrowers that we're a little too strict on our due diligence, especially with the after repair values of the properties that we vet. And I tell them, I said, hey, this is the value of the property that us at Conduit Capital are comfortable moving forward with. And listen, if you think the house can sell for 200,000 and I only think it could sell for 170 and you end up selling it for that 200, then hey, that's more profit for you. And we always want our borrowers to make money, because if our borrowers don't make money, then we don't make money. But we're very firm on the after repair values that we provide, and we tend to be very conservative in those estimates. Another thing that feeds into this is a lot of people love watching HGTV, the house flipping channel, and I admit I like watching it too. But sometimes as flippers, people can get a little too involved in a rehab, and this goes back to knowing your market. But not every house in America needs an HGTV level flip, where they've got these audacious rehabs that cost $200,000. There are a lot of markets out there, even some of the markets that we work in, that don't need that level of rehab, and going overboard on a rehab can really put a borrower in a tough position because just because a house has a $200,000 rehab doesn't mean someone in the area will buy it. Sometimes that can deter people because it makes the house more expensive. Um, so, lessons from this, avoid those HGTV flips. Make sure you do your due diligence process, takes into account kind of that bottom market potential. And that involves you as a lender being conservative on those LTVs and making sure that the deal can handle some stress if there is a market downturn. One more thing I want to mention with um, underestimating those market conditions is make sure you have multiple exit strategies. So, with our borrowers who are flipping the house, when we're vetting the deal, I also like to look at the house as a rental. So, if for some reason the market was in a downturn and maybe there weren't many buyers, is this a house where a renter could be put in there and it could at least cash flow? By evaluating it in those different ways, those different exit strategies, it secures your position in those investments so that if something goes wrong, you're able to adapt and move through it. So the second case study I want to look at is poor borrower vetting. So in addition to vetting the deal, like we talked about in our first case study, it's also important that you vet the person that you're lending the money to. Um, so one thing I see is that the borrower has a great pitch up front, but they kind of lack the execution skills. Um, and the way I try to frame us as a lender, and this may come off as is a little harsh, but at the end of the day, we're responsible for being a steward for the investors in our fund. So we have a right to be strict with the money that we lend. Um, but we at Conduit Capital are not the just give me a chance lenders. I understand, some people, you gotta they want to make it big and they might not be starting with a lot. But that's not really the world that we tend to operate in. We want to be a resource for our borrowers, and we love working with and educating borrowers who are new to real estate investing. We have a goal of flipping the city of Gary, Indiana, and if we can educate and help our borrowers do that, that's absolutely what we want to do. That's the whole meaning of being a conduit and not a bucket. However, the numbers still need to make sense with the deal, but also with the borrowers. Um, so that's why we emphasize so much borrower liquidity. Our borrowers make monthly interest payments, so we always want to look at their bank statements to ensure that they have the ability to make those monthly payments. If a monthly payment is missed, then the loan is in default and we have the right to foreclose. So it's a very serious process, and we never want to take our borrowers' last dollar when they're investing with us. Like I said, we want our borrowers to make money, and if they're not making money, we're not making money. And then the third case I want to look at is title and lien issues. So in this case, you see, the lender fails to uncover a hidden lien, and that hidden lien wipes out their returns. A great hedge to protect against this is to one, make sure you're in first position when lending on a deal, like our fund does. And you do this by not demanding, by making sure it's mandatory that you get a lender's commitment from the title company. This way, if on the back end, when the property is being sold, if any sort of bizarre title issues come up, your position is protected and your profits aren't wiped out by, some utility lien or whatever it may be that's still on the property. So it's important to always conduct those thorough title searches and don't just, trust the title company say so. You kind of got to dig in and make sure that insurance policy is in place. It's also important to mention with kind of ensuring your position as a lender. Being added to the borrower's property insurance as additional insured and loss payee. This is helpful because that way you're notified if there's any sort of insurance cancellation. Because obviously, the house burning down kind of tanks the deal if you're not properly protected. So always important to keep that property insurance piece in mind along with the title insurance piece. So just to provide a few takeaways, I have three of them for you. So first, due diligence. The due diligence process needs to be independent of the ebb and flow of the market. It needs to be conservative, and just because the market is hot like it was toward the end of COVID, doesn't mean it's going to stay hot forever. So make sure when you're vetting deals, we do this in Conduit Capital's case, that we're always as conservative as possible. Second point, a man's word is important, but there needs to be numbers backing him up. There's a lot of awesome salesmen out there in the investing world, but and that's a great quality to have, but there also needs to be numbers behind them. The deal needs to be able to make sense. You can't just make a bet using other people's money on someone's word. So it's important to keep that in mind. And then third, keep an eye out for problems in the past. Make sure you protect yourself from those skeletons in the closet with some of these old properties that have loans on them. You never know what can kind of creep up from the past, because there's some long title histories with at least some of the companies that Conduit Capital lends on. So we always get that lender's commitment to make sure that our position is protected. And this has been episode 17, Lessons from Private Lending Failures. I appreciate you joining me today, and we will see you guys next time. Remember, be a conduit, not a bucket. Thank you for tuning in to our podcast today. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to stay up to date with all of our latest content, please follow us on social media. You can find us on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram at Conduit Capital Podcast. We love hearing from our listeners, so feel free to send us a message, leave a comment, or share your thoughts with us.